she looked magnificent, as always. She wore a black pantsuit with chiffon, transparent, flowing arms. The outfit was dotted with rhinestone butterflies, Dolly's trademark. Me, I wore a straight denim skirt with a matching shirt. Dolly went on, beaming and smiling all over the room. I was totally in awe, since I was still very shy about performing. But having to follow Dolly wouldn't have been easy for a veteran. That's what I said, follow. I actually had to go on after her. The four guys, a quartet that sings regularly at the Opry, had to physically help me on to the center of the stage. I was that nervous. I sang Invitation to the Blues, which I'd sung on my first LP. I can hardly remember getting through it. For a long time, Charlie was fairly indifferent to my career. He wouldn't go with me on many of my shows. His attitude was, you do your thing and I'll do mine. It was almost as though he felt that he was a world champion steer wrestler, and what was I? Then a turning point came when I started to make money, and Charlie slowed down on his rodeo career when he began to get more involved. In the beginning, I was glad to have his help. My bookings and recordings were now beginning to escalate, getting to be more than I could comfortably juggle. And equally important to me, his involvement meant fewer separations. It seemed like an extension of the protectiveness that had first drawn me to him. It seemed that sharing something so basic to me, my music, could only bring us closer, and it did, for a while. But that's not to say there weren't some major chinks in our marriage. One predictable problem was his children. Anyone who's ever been a step-parent knows that it's not an easy role, and it wasn't always easy when Lance and Cody, Charlie's sons, came to visit us on school vacation in the summers and on weekends. I especially remember one visit the boys made when Charlie and I were living in the Chalky Shack. Naturally, I wanted them to like me. I was nervous and had made a special effort to make our little house as neat and homey as possible. One morning, Lance, Cody, and Charlie got into the pickup to go feed cattle. When I heard the engine running, I came out of the house, heading for the truck, intended to go along. Charlie and I had always fed the cattle together. We were a ranching team. Until that day. "Where are you going?" Charlie asked me. "Well, I'm going to feed with you," I said. "There's not enough room," Charlie said, and closed the pickup door, and he and his sons drove away. I'll never know why Charlie didn't say, "Now, Reba, I think the boys and I need a little time together today." Well, I could have accepted that one. Instead, he just left me standing there while the tailgate faded off into the distance. Man, that just broke my heart. We were still living at the Chalky Shack when I had my first top 10 record, You Lift Me Up to Heaven. It was my career-making record. It went to number 8 on the Billboard charts. It looked like I was finally getting someplace. I think Charlie would have been content to live in the Chalky Shack all of his life. The rent was cheap, $10 a month, which was important because Charlie had come into our marriage in debt. It wasn't his fault. He had gone into partnership to buy some cows with a relative who couldn't pay his part. Still, by our 4th year of marriage, I had begun to dream that Charlie and I could have a house of our own. Then I heard that my cousin Ricky's home in Stringtown might be up for sale. Ricky and her husband Lloyd were living outside Stringtown on 225 acres. It was a beautiful place with pine trees and the Chickasaw Creek running right through it. I'd always loved it. Charlie wasn't into the idea at all at first. He was afraid to get deeper into debt. But at least he agreed to explore getting a bank loan. "It's against my better judgment," the banker said. "I'll never get my money back, but I'm going to give you this loan." The bank got its money back to the penny. In late June of 1980, we moved into that beautiful ranch house in Stringtown. We had 3 bedrooms, running water, no mice, and a ceiling that stayed in place. By 1980, I had developed something of an organization. Red Stegall was acting as my career manager, and Paik was my road manager, though he was getting kind of tired of the job. At that point, we were putting together another band. It included Preacher on the drums, my sister doing the harmony, and Sharky Christian on lead guitar. Paik played the bass. We felt that we needed a steel guitar player, and a man none of us knew was recommended. His name was Narvel Blackstock. At that point, Narvel was an insurance agent who only played music on the side. He had been married at 16 and had 3 beautiful children by the time he was 21. And he loved music enough to drive from Burleson, Texas to Chalky, Oklahoma to meet Paik, 3.5 hours each way, then 2 hours each way to Nowata, Oklahoma, where I was scheduled to play a dance for a VFW hall. Imagine traveling 5 or 6 hours, sight unseen, to try out a gig with a girl singer you'd barely heard of. The job paid $150, yet Narvel was gung-ho. He even quit his steady job before he joined me. I've been thankful ever since that he did. Even as a child, Narvel's desire was to become a professional musician. I think it's really fascinating that he began to play the steel guitar when he was 8 years old. The steel guitar, with its foot and knee pedals, is one of the most complicated of all the stringed instruments. Narvel began his career playing the Pentecostal churches, going on the road with a gospel quartet about the time he began to shave. Those early experiences would be great training for the life he would finally be facing in my band. Narvel's initial gigs with me show a pretty clear picture of my performing life in those years. Even though I had a top 10 hit, you might call my operation somewhat less than professional. We arrived in Nowata, Narvel remembers, and we were supposed to play a show that night, but we had never played a note together. Reba had bought a brand new sound system, but nobody in the band knew how to hook it up. They finally got it hooked up about the time people were starting to come into the hall. We still hadn't rehearsed, and I still hadn't even seen Reba. Narvel would learn later that I hate to rehearse. My voice gets tired if I try to sing with each run-through, so I want to save it as much as possible for actual performing. I guess you could say I'm pretty lazy in that respect. Finally, I arrived with Charlie and Susie right before the show, and Narvel swears we all just walked into the hall and never spoke to him. Well, I don't remember. When the show ended, Narvel recalls that we three left without ever saying more to him than hello. By that time, he says, I sure wondered what kind of a deal I got myself into. Amazingly, Narvel came back. Susie and I traveled from show to show in a Lincoln Continental. The 5 guys in the band rode in our leaky van, which pulled the horse trailer that carried the instruments. The guys took turns driving through the night. When we arrived at our destination, we would get 2 hotel rooms, one for me and Susie and the other for the band, who would split the mattresses into 2 double beds and put the 5th guy on a rollaway. Their room would often be so jammed with bedding that no floor space would show, and the guys would have to walk across the top of the beds to get to the bathroom. At any time, Narvel could have gone back to the economic security and suburban comfort of the insurance industry. I was getting a lot of pressure at home to quit because I wasn't making enough money, Narvel says, but I'd gotten to the point where I knew that music was where my heart was. That's how Narvel came into a band he never left. In 1982, Narvel told Mama he believed in me tremendously. I'll be around long after everybody else has quit, he said, and he is. I'd hate to try to guess how many miles I traveled during the 1980s. So when I got my first bus in 1982, a 20-year-old Silver Eagle, it was really a big event. For a touring singer, finding a good bus driver can be as important as finding good musicians. I'm a light sleeper, and since we travel at all hours, I had to look hard to find someone who could drive smoothly. Then, too, especially in those early years, my drivers had to be good mechanics. My first driver, Wormy Miller, once had to get under the bus with a broom handle to try to force the transmission into reverse. After Wormy, we got a driver who the band nicknamed Salmon X Rex, because he was so slow. He used to make U-turns in the middle of 4-lane traffic. He scared us all to death. Then in 1983, we hired a real doozy who only lasted 17 days. When we were in Davenport, Iowa, after our show, he drove through a side street underpass and almost got the bus stuck in the tunnel. I could hear the lug rack on top of the bus being scraped off as he tried to force the bus through. "Stop! Stop!" Everyone on board started yelling. The new driver made things worse by trying to claim the bus had cleared that same underpass on the way to the show. "Someone laid asphalt on the road while we were at the concert," he said.